At time with Jordan. Is this mic on? The mic is live. Alright, we are ready to go. Foodie talk. Alright. On the radio, let's stop footing. Yes, this is AI. Keen to get started. Pump those ratings up high. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Alrighty guys, welcome back to another episode of Airtime with Jordan. I'm your host Jordan Fasso, and today on the podcast we're going to keep it simple but get a bit of an overview of the whole the landscape of the league right now. So as you know, every listener knows, we're going through weekly power rankings at the moment, just with shifting up and down based on the results. But this week we're sort of doing an extended version of that. I think it's time. We're about a third of the way through the season now, so we have a decent sample. Start to project out where teams are at, and so in accordance with those power rankings, we're also going to do a bit of a stock take on each team. So what that's going to entail, I'm just going to go through each team, give their sort of vitals, where they are on the ladder, where they're ranking in offense and defense, bit of a summary on how they've gone so far in the season. Now that we have a good enough sample, as I said, and then shout out some of the players from each team. So. Keen to get into this one, and just want to shout out to Andrew Whelan from wheeloratings.com.au. He does some great work with data analysis, using a lot of his stuff today, the offensive and defensive ratings there from his models there. So really appreciate him doing some really heavy lifting for us here, and we're just going to go through each, and then in the player shout out section we will also be using the player similarity tool based on the stats so far in the season, so who's playing most similar to other players. So we get a bit of a comparison there as well from some of the players that we're going to shout out. So with that being said, let's get underway. Number one, still standing there the whole season, they've been there for me. It's the Brizzy Lions. They're 7-1 overall, 114.4 percentage on the season. They're ranking 7th in offensive rating at the moment and 2nd in defensive rating. So, strong start to their defense to start the year. No real worries as of yet for me. Obviously, they had that big flogging at the hands of the Maggies up at the Gabba a few weeks ago now. But, I think, as I said, no real worries as of yet. They had the shortest off-season of any team. They're a little bit of a worrying trend of getting behind in games, but, I don't think I'm not that worried. As obviously they feel like they have another gear to get to, and that's what's happened. You saw them start fast against the Saints and also the Suns on the weekend. So, I don't think that we need to worry too much. I think they're going to figure that part of their game out. And I think, overall, the ability to get wins from behind sort of makes me think that there is absolutely still improvement left in this group. And hopefully they can hit those sort of high patches more regularly, I suppose. And, they've had to play really well on offense to actually get back into those games. So, yes, it has been in spurts, but I do think at their best they're going to rocket up the offensive ratings across the league at the moment. So, I think that the fact that they've had those patches where they've kicked a few, 6 or 7 unanswered goals in a row, sort of fills me with confidence, all while Charlie Cameron hasn't had a great start to the season either, and he had a big game on the weekend against the Suns, so maybe that's the jump start that he needed for his season. And, on the Lions as well, they've still, as I said a couple of weeks ago, they've obviously still got Tom Duday and Kitty Coleman to return as well. And I said, if either of those guys are close to 90% of their previous selves, and the Lions are just going to solidify their defense with both of those guys coming in, and in Coleman's case, their offense is going to really improve once he gets back, because not only is he an elite kick from half back who helps set them up and transition the ball, what's that going to mean where they play Zorko? Maybe they don't need him at half back anymore with how good he's been, but maybe they can play him up forward or in the midfield more, or still keep him down back. So excited to see what happens with Duday and Coleman in the coming weeks as they return. So that's sort of where I'm at on the Lions at the moment. Shout outs, it's just going to be the Ashcrofts. Just an awesome story so far this year. Either one of them probably could have won the Marcus Ashcroft medal in the Q clash on the weekend, but Will, everyone knows on the podcast how much I'm talking about him, but Levi is really starting to impress as well. With his short start to his career, and the difference between the two, I think Will is obviously the more premium prospect, but Levi he has a really big frame. I think that he's going to fill out well into, and I think he is going to be a sort of that big contested, a bit bigger than Will, I reckon, when he starts to fill out, and he's just shaping up to be a nice contested player for them. And I've got some of the comparisons based on his stats for the year on Levi Ashcroft, and there's got a few interesting ones. So you've got Massimo D'Ambrosio, Harry Morrison, Hugh McCluggage, Will Drew, and Jake Saligo. So a really good mix of inside and out players for Levi to start his career with other guys around the league. The Pies, they're second for me. 6-2 overall, 133.2%, which includes, of course, that absolute smashing that they copped at the hands of the Giants in the first round. So, they've recovered really well since then. They're fifth in offensive rating, first in defensive rating though. So, both sides of the ball, they're just popping at the moment. They're the second best team at scores from turnover differential, only below Adelaide, and they don't have the overall the defensive prowess that the Pies do Adelaide. So I think the fact that the Pies are scoring so well from their defense from creating turnovers whilst obviously being really, really potent in defense in general, just shows how strong they are on that side of the ball and how it's translated into their offense. And they're doing it from stoppage as well. So the two biggest sort of scoring sources are from turnover and stoppage in the AFL. So they're fifth in differential scores from stoppage as well. So they're top five in both of the main scoring sources at the moment, which is one's obviously generated by their great defense, but they can get after it themselves as well. And doing both of those two things, as I said, at a top 5 level, while being the number 1 defense in the league, shows how good they are on both sides of the ball. And mind you, this is while they've had one of the harder draws in the AFL so far. They've had to play Brisbane, Geelong, GWS, and the Bulldogs so far. So I think that the Pies are shaping very, very nicely. I think they're going to be a tough beat, and it could be Brizzy and Collingwood at the end of the year again for what should be another epic grand final if that is the case. And just a quick shout out on this one. Obviously, Nick Dacos and Steele Sidebottom have probably been the two most impressive players for the Pies this year. Pretty obvious ones, but I think Nick Dacos just continues to get better and better, which is really impressive. Obviously incremental at this point, but he is getting better and better. Still Sidebottom, I don't know how he's doing this at this age, but same thing for him. He's just unbelievable. He's had one of the better years of his career, if not the best so far at age 35, so he deserves a shout out for that. Geelong, they're third on my power rankings at this point in the season. They're 5-3, 117.4% on the season. They're third in offensive rating and 8th in defensive rating. So I think the thing with Geelong that I'm going to start with is they just know how to win big games, and I think that should scare the competition. They've got arguably the two biggest games of the year so far. Both involved Geelong, I think. The one against Hawthorn was a big match and really, really entertaining one from a competitive standpoint, and the same on the weekend against Collingwood. And in both cases, they were the better team on the big stage in those games, and I think that really bodes well for them in finals. I don't think they're playing their best footy at this point either in the season. So, the fact that they're doing that, they're winning the important ones whilst not playing at their absolute best, it really scares me. I think that they can really pull it together, and they're shaping quite well. Not everything's gone their way either this year. They've had, their defense is 8th overall right now, which, is probably not what Geelong hang their hat on, so to speak. But, just the defensive upside that they do have, because Tom Stewart and Jack Henry have only played a handful of games together this year. Tom Stewart definitely has not been at his best. He's been struggling with this knee injury, so not saying he's definitely going to get back to his best at this point in this year necessarily. They might have to manage him a bit, but I think that their defense absolutely has upside with the fact that those two have missed a bit of footy this year, and if they're able to get healthy and play together, then they're going to be hard to score against as well. So I think that on top of all the defensive side of things, the main story point for them has been Patrick Dangerfield just absolutely willing his team to victory in a few different games this year, and he's probably been I don't know. I've not been the biggest Patrick Dangerfield fan over the course of his career, but this year he's been undeniable with how good he's been in that shift to a forward based role, and his pressure and just attack on the ball, which has been insane. And you got to give him his props. It's been pretty scary for other teams to know that he's coming at the ball full pelt at the moment, and he's creating all sorts of havoc down there. And with him and Jeremy Cameron in the forward line, it's quickly become one of the best forward lines in the league, and with all the other smalls they have, and of course Ollie Dempsey as well, just doing his thing on the wing quickly on him, he's just such a good like a really, really tough matchup. He, obviously covers a lot of ground running wise, but he's going to outmark every wingman in the competition, and the only one that probably outmark him is his teammate Mark Lutzars when he plays there. So, Ollie Dempsey has a real knack for charging forward and getting to the goal square and playing one-on-one against his opponent, and it's a real he's a really, really hard matchup at the moment, and he's a freak of a player. So love watching Ollie Dempsey go about it. On the player shout-out side of things, though, I'm going to go with the obvious one here as well. Bailey Smith, he's been elite at finding the ball. Great sort of bounce back year after his almost 2 years out with that knee injury there, and with good reason he nursed that back to 100%, and he is looking, his running power is just something to absolutely behold. He does not stop charging around the field, Bailey Smith, and that's why he's up to 30-something possessions on the year, and really dominating and finding the ball a lot at the moment. The one worry I do have with Bailey Smith is that maybe he is just treading water for danger in the home and away season in terms of just being a bit of an innings eater in the middle. I think that he's absolutely, as I said, prolific at getting the ball, but at the same time he is prolific at turning it over. He's going about 50% by foot and about low 60s by disposal efficiency in general, which is not very good at all. And if he keeps turning the ball over at this rate, I don't know whether he's a must to keep in the midfield in the finals. Obviously he's gonna, in the actual centre bounces side of things, because obviously you probably want Patrick Dangerfield to be there a bit more come finals time, and his main complaint of the Dogs, Bailey Smith, was that he wanted to be an in and under inside mid and not playing off half forward or a wing. So I guess the worry is how do they manage that if he isn't performing at those levels that you need to at finals time and taking care of the ball. But I think he's running, he's undeniable. He's going to provide that every single game, and running obviously is covering the ground is very important come finals time as well. So he's still going to be a useful player, but a little worried about his ball use at the moment, and I think that's gone a little bit under discussed as the season's worn on. Fourth on the power rankings are the Hawthorn Hawks. They're 6-2 at the moment. Got a percentage of 125.6. Fourth on offense and fourth on defense. And I think the biggest thing with the Hawks so far, they've had a solid start to the year, but the worry for me is they just haven't shown up as sort of the opposite to Geelong in that way. They haven't shown up in the two biggest games that they've played in this year. So obviously the Port Adelaide game where they just did not show up at all, and maybe the Geelong one is a bit harsh, but I think they didn't play very well against Geelong either. So that they didn't deserve to win either of those games. We're lucky in the Geelong one to be in it late, I think, but they just need to. I'm not super worried Hawthorn over the journey have been a team that sort of plays up in finals a bit more and gets over the line there, which when it matters, but hopefully that is the case with this iteration of the team as well, because they haven't dealt with playing in the spotlight too well this year anyway. So and it hasn't been the strongest draw either for the Hawks yet, so I'll have a couple disclaimers for them to start the year. Not sure we've seen the best version of them yet though. There's been a lot of injuries throughout the season, suspensions. Probably won't know the best version of the Hawks until finals time, when hopefully Will Day returns and gives them the spark that they've been missing over the last sort of 3-4 weeks, how long he's been out now. But I think the upside is still there for the Hawks. Maybe not as confident as I was at the start of the year, but I think they're still a top 4 team. Cole Shadir and Mitch Lewis obviously to come back as well. Either one of them is really going to give the Hawks a nice boost up forward. As I've said, as the season's worn on, they just really need someone to consistently bring the ball to ground, which would really allow some of the gun small forwards. Luke Bruce obviously is the eldest one of the group, but your Nick Watsons, Connor McDonald's and Ginnevans of the world, and Dylan Moore of course too. So we need someone big to bring the ball down. Scholl is not that guy. He's a different sort of key forward to that contested marking one. But I think that if one of those two, Coulter or Mitch, is able to bring that to the team, then it's going to be very exciting. And shout out to Jack Gunston as well, who has been doing his best, but he is currently third in the Coleman, which I would not have had on my bingo card to start the year. So shout out to Jack Gunston, although he isn't actually one of the players I want to shout out. That is Jai Newcomb. He is absolutely Mr. Consistent so far for the Hawks this year. I ran his stats in the similarity tool, and he is playing his stats are most comparable to Nick Dacos, Lachie Neale, Ollie Dempsey, Tom Liberatore, and LDU, and Jack McCrow. So, yeah, very much elite company there for Jai Newcomb to start the season. He's taken his game to another level yet again, and I just love watching him play. He's just one of those guys who's just hard at it every week, tackles, gets the ball, finds it, has great breakaway pace from the pack, and yeah, love watching him. Another player shout out, Nick Watson. I love this little guy. He's absolutely the definition of, if he was on your team, he would be your favourite player. He's been more accurate this year. He's gotten over those goal kicking woes he had early on in his career, and yeah, really waiting for that first game where, you know, he's had a few games where he's like had really big moments, but I'm keen for the game where he finally kicks, you know, a bag of 5 or 6, and I think all the Hawthorn crowd will be up and about for that one. Next up, 5th overall, we have the Western Bulldogs, and they're 5-3 on the season, 127.1 percentage. So far for the Doggies, they've moved up one spot from last week, so I must say that the first 4 teams, no movement for me from last week, but the Doggies have gone from 6th to 5th in the power rankings. So, yeah, with that being said, 2nd in offensive rating, 5th in defensive rating, and just on the Dogs, I've really loved what Bevo's done this year. I predicted early in the season that this would be finally the year where they do fire him, and I absolutely have to eat crow on that one. It hasn't been the case, and he's probably been the coach of the year to start the season. I don't think there's anyone that really is even close, and yeah, he still doesn't have a contract for next year, but that's besides the point. This is a footy podcast, not necessarily a coaching contract podcast, but you know, he has the Dogs absolutely rolling at the moment. The fact that they're 2nd in offense and 5th in defense, top 5 in both categories, with the amount of injuries and inconsistent structure they've had to start the year, is that he's got them absolutely rolling, and they're competing on both sides of the ball. Matt Kennedy has been probably the best recruit of the year, which I would not have tipped coming into the season. He's been absolutely incredible finding the ball and getting clearances and things like that. So really good find by them in recruiting. Very excited to see what they look like when you finally get Bont, Sam Darcy later in the year, and Adam Treloar all playing together, as they have not had one game with those 3 playing yet this season. And you probably think that they're probably the three of the top 5 players, I'd say, based on last year's form, and Sam Darcy, especially this year. I don't think that's even a question. He's closing in on Bont as their best player, if not there already. So, yeah, pretty scary stuff if they can finally get healthy. Obviously, Liam Jones missed a few games too, their key back. So they've been moving the magnets around like crazy this year. Laurie Lobb spent time forward and back. James O'Donnell's been thrown around as well. Luke Beveridge is absolutely earning his paycheck this year, and credit to him. He's been really good. Coach of the year so far for me, and this is all with the Jamara Ugle-Hagan stuff going on in the background, which somehow hasn't been a distraction for the club. So, I've been super impressed so far with how they've handled that as well. So, yeah, good on them. And, yeah, they just keep trucking along and, yeah, competing in every game that they've played in so far. And, yeah, I think that, they're going to be a very tough out. And the ceiling on this team is quite high as well. I think that they absolutely have premiership upside as to the... Yeah, I think those top 5 sort of teams are the ones that I'd be tipping to win the flag. One of those 5 right now. Obviously, that's a pretty big pool. But yeah, after this, I think there's a clear drop-off in the tiers of teams. Player shout-outs right now. Ed Richards, absolute beast. He's having some sort of season right now, and being full-time in the midfield helps. Not having anyone in his way, but yeah, his season is compared to Noah Anderson, Isaac Heaney, and Steele Sidebottom as well. So that's the sort of company that he's playing. Yeah, his stats are similar to at the moment, and yeah, just really impressed with Ed Richards' year so far. Tom Liberatore as well. Got to shout him out again. Did a few weeks ago, but he just continues to get it done. He's again one of the other guys who really stood up in the middle with Bont out, and I think he's played himself into the season perfectly. He can probably take a little bit of a back step now that Bont is back, and Ed Richards is a big contested player as well. So maybe freshen Libra up a little bit for finals time would be nice if they could do that. But yeah, they're doing very well, the Doggies, and it's been a very good watch to start the year as well. Enjoy watching them play. 6th overall for me in the power rankings this week are the GWS Giants, and they've dropped one spot, so them and the Bulldogs have swapped places for me. They're 4-4, 115%. They're 8th on offense, 7th on defense, and yeah, they're just not quite there at the moment where I thought they would be. I still am a bit of a believer in the upside, but it's starting to get a little faint for me right now. I feel like the Giants have done this the last couple of years as well. They've started the season like in decent form and then had a bit of a lull and then just come storming home. So maybe that's just the the shape of their season that they sort of like to play. But yeah, I think that at the moment it's just not quite clicking for them. And I spoke a bit last week about how they just can't get the ball out of the middle right now. They're 13th in clearance differential on the year, so they're just really getting beat up by other teams. And I would have thought a team with Finn Callahan and the amount that you're paying him and Tom Green, they would dominate here. But I think Kieran Briggs definitely has a role to play. He's one of the worst ruckmen in the league right now. I just don't see what he's bringing. At ground level he's okay. In the ruck he's not very good at all. But yeah, I think that's part of the issue, but also Tom Green and Finn just need to be better, and more specifically Finn, because Tom Green is 7th in the league in clearance average at the moment, and then the next best on the Giants list is Finn Callahan at 64th in the league, and that's really not ideal when you're paying. I know he's young and you're paying. It's an investment, but to be 64th in the league in clearances when you're getting paid whatever it is at the Giants is definitely not. You're definitely not giving them much of a return there, and I get it's his first year in the middle, and he's not. Maybe it's probably not his absolute bread and butter just yet, but no matter how you look at it, I think 64th is pretty shit for that return. He's absolutely one of the best power runners in the league. I'm not going to knock him there. He absolutely provides value to this Giants team, don't get me wrong, but it's just they need to get the ball moving out of the middle a bit more, and there's no point Tom Green being 7th if no one else is lifting as well in the clearances at the moment. And I think they're missing Brent Daniels quite a bit. It looked like they were going to play him in the middle more this year than last year, and he just gives them that mid-forward connection as well as his ability to run through the middle and give them a different look at times. Like we've definitely seen Toby in the middle more this year than last year, and I think partly is because of Brent Daniels' absence at the moment, and they need that guy that's able to play both positions and give them a spark in the middle. But Toby's not like the midfield clearance Toby that he once was, and I think he's had really good moments in the midfield, don't get me wrong, but yeah, Brent Daniels is a different player, and just gives them a bit of zip around that position. I think that they definitely have lost with Peatling going out of the team as well on the back of last year. So just a watch for me on their midfield depth at the moment. But overall, there's enough talent here for me to believe that they're going to turn it around at some point, I think. So yeah, I'm still hanging on hope, even though they're 4-4 at the moment. But yeah, not looking amazing right now for the Giants, and that's sort of why I've dropped them down to 6th at the moment. That's where I'll leave it there for the Giants. Adelaide, they're 7th. They've moved up one more spot for me from last week. They're 5-3 on the season. Got a percentage of 131.8. Very healthy. They're the best offense in the league, but they're the 9th defense in the league at the moment, and that's sort of the summary of Adelaide in that way. It's actually quite easy to see why they're where they are, and why they're probably not the most reliable team at the moment, because they've been so potent when they do get the ball, but they're just so easy to score against right now. In terms of a team that is looking to contend, you don't want to be middle of the pack, 9th in the league. In your defense when you're trying to be a contender or at least make finals, and if you can make finals being that, but to truly contend you're not going to be able to. And if it's sort of the structural debate with them, isn't it? It's talked about quite a bit in the media at the moment, but I think it is the sort of the axis that their season's going to hang around. And if they do play smaller, like many are calling for them to do, in order to, what that's going to do is provide more pressure up forward, then they risk the chance of losing some potency up forward as well. So ideally, in an ideal world, only playing one of Tex or Fogarty, obviously alongside Riley Thilthorpe, who was an absolute lock for their team at the moment, it would, in theory, generate more pressure on teams exiting their 50 and, allow the likes of Josh Worrell, Michael Laney and Mitch Hinge to sort of set up behind the ball and get their intercept game going. And, I think schematically it does make sense. Like, you're going to hopefully keep the same level of offense and increase your defense with, intercept marks and things like that. But you just want to make sure that losing yeah, you just want to make sure that losing one of like Tex Walker or Fogarty, that does strengthen your defense enough in theory, and does let you get more scores from turnover with those three mid defenders rebounding the ball. Because if that doesn't work, then you go from what you go away from what got you here in the first place, where you're leaning into your offense, but knowing you're not going to. At the same time, I know you're probably not going to win a premiership with the 9th best defense in the league, but it's better than being the 9th best offense and still the 9th best defense in the league if it doesn't work out that way. So yeah, I think that there's some interesting things that the Crows are going to have to figure out in the back half of the season, because they're not going to get to where they are with their defense right now, but yeah, hopefully removing one of the key forwards doesn't completely pull the floor out of their offense either, I guess, is the worry, because you don't want to lose that at the same time. So yeah, interesting one to watch for them. Player shout-outs, Josh Worrell, absolute beast. This guy reads the ball as well as anyone. Strong in one-on-ones. His loss percentage is only at 18% this year, so he is just an absolute beast down there at the moment. I love watching him play. And Isaac Rankin as well. Just got to shout him out. When he's around the ball, he looks like the most dangerous player on the ground. I think there's probably a world where in the next 2 years, we're considering him as a genuine top 5 player in the game, and one of those guys who can win it off his own boot. And yeah, I think that goal against Freo, I know they lost a couple of weeks ago over in Perth, but it just shows how talented he is. He just, for those who didn't see, just clean gather out of a pack, one motion, just kicked across his body, bananaed it from a pack, and just slotted it. So absolute all-world talent, and in the ran his stats so far this year, and his statistical comparison came out as Jason Horne-Francis. So two very much up-and-coming stars in South Australia, playing very similar to each other so far this year. 8th, we have the Sydney Swans, and I've bumped them back up after a bit of a drop last week. They've gone up 4 spots for me. They're 3 and 5, 97.2%, 9th on offensive rating, 10th in defense, and as I said, I put them back up after their win against the Giants, but I'm really struggling to place this team this year. I don't necessarily think that they have premiership upside anymore, but there's just too much talent here and general continuity in the list outside of the coaching change. That's the glaring one that's the issue, and the big loss obviously in the grand final, which is why they're probably not playing as well as they were last year. But I think that the talent and continuity in terms of the playing list is enough to get them back into playing finals. Errol Goulden is still 5 to 7 weeks away, which is not ideal. So, they're going to keep missing his play. But in the meantime, they just sort of need to figure out a way to consistently compete and get wins so that they do stay within the hunt. So when he does come back, they hopefully, playing solid enough without him, and then he's just a bit of icing that can, get them primed for finals time, or at least for a stretch to make finals at the end of the year. So I think we saw on the weekend as well, Dean Cox is not loving his key forward setup. Joel Amati obviously out, and Logan McDonald still out as well, but he went with Joel Hamling and Aaron Francis up forward as his key forwards, and they got the win against the Giants, but it definitely doesn't inspire me with much confidence in front of the ball, which is sort of why I think that they're going to cap out at the sort of the 7th or 8th best team of the league at the moment. Not playing great footy, but I think that I trust them a bit more than the rest of the teams below them, just based on talent alone. So that's sort of why I've bumped them back up into the top 8 in my power rankings. Player shout-outs for them. Riley Bice, he's been one of the absolute finds of the season. Obviously picked up from the VFL, and great scouting by them. Ran his stats across the season so far, and he's playing the most comparably to Joel Jeffrey, Will Powell, absolute gun for the Gold Coast, and Rory Laird as well from Adelaide. So doing some very nice work off halfback is Riley Bice, and as much as Nick Blakey's had to defend at times this year as a key position player, at least they have found Riley Bice who's able to break the lines with his run. So it hasn't been as much of a trade-off as maybe it was made out to be, but obviously you want Blakey doing a bit more than he has so far. So that's obviously not on Riley Bice, but just want to shout him out. He's had a really, really good start to his career. Freo. I've got them 9th in my power rankings at the moment. I've dropped them a spot from last week. Probably could have dropped them more after that performance against the Saints, but didn't want to completely overreact. They're 4 and 4 on the season, 97.2%, which is not great. Obviously, 13th in offense and 11th in defense. So it's not inspiring right now for the Dockers, but it's just not working as well as I'd hoped for them. I was pretty high on them coming into the season. I think I had them 4th in my power rankings to start the year, but they're just consistently dropping for me. I've held them a little bit, but yeah, they're just one of the most inconsistent good talent teams that I've ever seen. So if you look at like who they played now and how they've performed, I think it's, I don't know, the unfortunate thing for this group, as talented as they are, is that they look a lot more like in the class of like an Essendon or St Kilda on the ladder than they do at Brisbane and Geelong, which is obviously where I think that they were probably aiming to start the season. So, just really falling short of expectations consistently at the moment, the Dockers. And, it gets worse. Hayden Young apparently going to be out for the year as well. It's just a shocking result for them. They really, really needed what he brought to the team in terms of his toughness inside. And, I'm a big fan of him, and I feel bad that he's going to miss the rest of the season. And, I'll keep bringing while I'm talking about the midfield and Hayden Young and what he brings there, like I'll keep banging this drum that regardless of how good Brayshaw and Sarong seem to be individually, they just aren't guys that are going to win a premiership with the current way that they play. Like, they've come to Marvel Stadium against the Saints, who, to be honest, are a one-man midfield at the moment. They've got Jack McRae and that's it. And they got absolutely beaten up, but like far too often. They just in general, not even on the weekend, they just get beaten up far too often by inferior talent. And the Saints on the weekend, for example, dominated them with Jack McRae, Jack Steele, and Hugo Garcia being the main guys that attended centre bounces. And I think that if you're looking at those guys, that talent disparity on paper, you'd say that that's easily going to be a Freo win, especially when they had 2 rucks going up against Rowan Marshall, which I'll get to in a second. But the output that you got from Brayshaw, who had 18 touches and 1 clearance for the game. Sarong had 15 touches. He did have 8 clearances, which is great out of 15 touches, but only 159 metres gained. So neither of them are just damaging consistently enough for you. And yeah, it's either those two aren't good enough consistently, or you rely too heavily on these two to get results, which a team as talented as they are, you could argue it's either way. But yeah, I just think that you need to really think about how you're structuring your team if you're relying on Andrew Brayshaw and Caleb Sarong to get the job done. And I just don't think they've been able to consistently and they've been good players for the best part of 3 or 4 years now individually, and it hasn't really led to much success in the midfield. So you start to question how good they are really. And the 2 ruck thing, it's look, I think it works okay when Luke Jackson is your on-baller at times as well. Like that, they got absolutely smashed in 3 quarters by the Saints, or 4 quarters really. But early in the last quarter when they moved the magnets around, Luke Jackson went on ball, and Darcy was still in the ruck, and that looked okay. But the issue is when you're playing two rucks, can be okay, right? Like we've seen instances of it working. Most recently with the Pies winning with Darcy Cameron and Mason Cox in the team, right? But the thing is that Mason Cox, like, for as much shit as he gets, he brings the ball to ground, he gets to a lot of contests, and he's very accurate in front of goal when he gets it from like 30 metres out or whatever. I'm not a Mason Cox guy, but I will firmly say that he's a better forward than either Darcy or Luke Jackson. And that is saying something. So when you're playing 2 of them together, you're one player down on the field because neither of them is a good forward. Maybe Luke Jackson is 50% of what a forward might be, and Mason Cox might be 70%. Whatever. I don't actually know. I'm not going to get into that. Either way, I think that the fact is that Sean Darcy is absolutely a one position player, which is fine for if you're playing 1 ruck. But when you're playing 2 that are probably taking up heaps of your salary cap, and you've got Luke Jackson who's sitting, you're just trying to find a position for him while Sean Darcy has to play ruck. It's just not working, and you're not getting value for those 2 being in the team at the same time. So yeah, really, really disappointing start to the year for Freo. I've still got them 9th in my power rankings just based on the amount of talent they have on this list alone. But yeah, it's getting grim very quickly for them, unfortunately. And shout-outs for them. Murphy Reid, great start to the year for a first-year player. He's doing pretty much everything above average as a small forward, and is just he's been really crafty. He's shown a bit of pace as well. So yeah, really like what I've seen from him to start the year. Good drafting by the Dockers, and so far his similarity tool comes out closest to Willard Rioli. On field at least. I haven't seen any Murphy Reid off-field incidents to start the year. So yeah, purely on field, no similarity in their stats of threatening text messages or taunting. But anyway, And the other one is James Harms. So yeah, he's had a really solid start to his career, Murphy Reed, I would say. Carlton. Let's get into the baggers. They're 3-5 on the season, 108.6%, 10th in offensive rating and 4th in defensive rating at the moment. So with the Blues, there's obviously something here. They have a lot of top end talent, but I'm just not really sure how quickly they're going to be able to pull it all together. You know, the season's already a third of the way through, so you're sort of starting to see what the teams actually are. And the defense is obviously good enough, but are they going to be able to find their mojo offensively is the question. And you know, Adelaide on the weekend's probably not the best matchup for them, given how heavily Adelaide are able to score. So, you know, if they just games sort of just got away from them pretty quickly in the end, or maybe not quickly, but just sort of just snowballed for them, I guess. But you know, they have no other answer for a team if the other team gets out ahead of them in the first place. It's going to be hard for them to crawl back into games, and they're sort of like in that way, I guess they're like a better version of Melbourne, which is not where you want to be right now, I guess. But the upside is that, you know, Curto and Mackay haven't really fired a whole lot just yet outside of that Geelong game a couple of weeks ago. So, you know, maybe they're enough to sort of get that offense up a couple notches. Like, I don't think they're ever going to break into the sort of top 5, but you know, if they start getting into about 7th or something in offense and they keep their defense where they are, then they're definitely a chance to play finals. Still, they're not that far out of it yet. So, yeah, I think in addition to Curnow and Mackay generating more opportunities forward of ball for the Blues and scoring opportunities, Sam Walsh just definitely needs to find a bit more consistency to his game as well to complement Paddy Cripps at the moment. And you know, the way Tom De Koninck's been playing, I think that they need to capitalise on his form as well a bit more with Walsh finding consistency with his game too. So, yeah, I think there's upside there for the Baggers. They've moved down one spot for me this week, but in the power rankings, so yeah, they're back down to 10th at the moment. But yeah, I think that there's definitely some upside here, but it is sort of starting to have to squint to see the offensive upside a bit anyway. So with the player shout-out section for the Blues, I'm going to shout out George Hewitt. Just pretty unheralded at times, I think, you know, with the names in this team, obviously, but he's quietly leading this team in disposals. He's averaging 29.5 for the year, good for 7th in the comp overall, which is, pretty insane, I think, and he's still capable of playing run-with roles as well. He's a really important player for them, and so far in the year, his stats are most similar to Steele Sidebottom, Max Holmes, Will Ashcroft, Tom Liberatore, Luke Parker, Jake Saligo, and Zach Butters. So just really, really good company there for Georgie Hewitt, and hopefully he can continue his form, and the other guys in the team start to find theirs as well. 11th, we've got the Gold Coast Suns. They've dropped a spot for me after last week. That finally played a tough team, and we'll get into that in a second. But yeah, I think they're sort of starting to show why I'm not super high on them. They're 5-2 overall, very, very healthy percentage of 140.4. They're 6th on offense and 6th in defensive rating on the year. So, you know, good, solid profile, obviously. But again, I'm just worrying about their legitimacy. They couldn't stop the Lions, who are quite easily the best team that they've played so far, and it wasn't particularly close either. The scoreboard made them look much closer than they were in the end, and the Lions just cruised in that game for the most part and looked very much out of their league. And I think, you know, unfortunately the Gold Coast small defenders got cooked. The midfield was destroyed, even with Witts really dominating the ruck there against Oscar. So yeah, not the best profile for the Suns in their, you know, the most anticipated Q clash ever. They just got absolutely blown off the park, and really started in the middle, because Matt Rao, bless his soul, I've long been a fan of his, but he's probably the most one-dimensional mid in the game right now. You know, I think that he showed on the weekend when, you know, Josh Dunkley just absolutely took him to school. And yeah, if you can tag Matt Rao out of a game that easily and just push him off the ball and don't let him get his clearances going, then what else can he do? And, you know, most teams, that at least good teams, are going to have a big-bodied mid that could tag him at, you know, at least 80% of what Josh Dunkley did. Like, if I just go through quickly, like, obviously Brisbane, Josh Dunkley, Collingwood, they could chuck Jack Crisp on him, or even Scott Pendlebury's used as a tagger sometimes around the ball. Who else is there? Let me go through this list. Hawthorn have Connor Nash, Geelong have Tom Atkins. Like, there's just a lot of guys that I think that they're going to bookmark this game, that what the Lions did to Matt Rao, and it is going to be, it might be curtains for Gold Coast after watching this game and getting the film on this one. So yeah, I'm not super high on them right now, because, you know, if that happens, like someone tags him out of the game even at 80% of what Josh Dunkley did on the weekend, then, yeah, as I said, the Suns have no clearance upside. The ground ball game goes down the toilet, which, absolutely is needed for finals. And, the other thing is he's just, as I said, so one-dimensional as a player. He went forward. He had no impact up forward. Is not a forward. Can't run. Like, he's not fast enough to create separation from his opponent. Hasn't probably spent enough time there to know how to crumb or draw free kicks up forward. So it's a little bit of a worry. And I think that in general, like, sort of praised them at the start of the year when they were trying to find some positional versatility for Tuke Miller in particular, not playing him in the middle as much, but as a group, it's you're a bit stuck because Raul can't play anywhere else. Noah Anderson, he's only ever played off half back otherwise, and you're not going to play him off half back with the introduction of Dan Rioli and Johnny Noble. So where are you going to play Noah Anderson now? So all of a sudden you've got your two best midfielders who should be good enough to dominate any midfield, but showed on the weekend they're not. Stuck in the midfield and not able to move the magnets around them very much, and you're sort of hamstrung a little bit, I think, in this team. And Bailey Humphrey, I guess, is the one that you can move through there as well, who does play a bit in the middle, but otherwise, who's going to go through the middle and make a difference? And even aside to that point, like, where are you going to put Noah Anderson and Matt Rowell if they're not playing well in the midfield? So a bit of a worry for me with them. The other thing with positional versatility they had last year, they had Charlie Ballard, who, one of the best intercept players in the comp, if not the best. And, that having him and Collins down back really allowed them to be able to use Mac Andrews as a swingman, which is what got him paid so well. But they haven't been able to do that either because obviously Ballard's out at the moment. So, I just worry about the amount of counters that this team has to what teams may throw at them, and I sort of think that they're going to drop out of this finals race pretty shortly, and I'm going to hold firm on that. The player shoutouts. Bailey Humphrey, he's been absolutely amazing this year. He's the closest thing to Dusty right now in the comp. Midfield or forward, he doesn't matter. It doesn't matter for him. He'll punish the opposition right now wherever he plays. And, up forward, he's winning 52.2 of his offensive one-on-ones, which is just an absurd number. He's shouldn't be doing that at the size he is, but he's such a strong midfielder, sort of midfield size body, and he leads them in post clearance, ground ball gets, and in goal assists. So he's really handy around the ball or up forward. And just want to see him hit the scoreboard a little bit more than he has so far. Only kicked the 6 majors to start the year, but Bailey Humphrey is in ripping form. Port Adelaide, they're 12 for me. They've moved down a spot. They're 4-4 on the season. 87.9%, 11th on offense, 15th on defense, and unfortunately, I do believe that this team is built on emotion. And they had a couple good wins against the Hawks and the Swans, but as I said, like, they're emotional wins. The Hawks obviously go without being said, and then the Swans, they knocked them out in the finals last year. So like the two solid wins they had, and then they followed it up with a near loss to the Kangas and then a 90-point loss to the Dogs out in Ballarat. It's just, this team is just too... they fluctuate with their effort way too much to be a consistent performer. And, they have the ability, they have the talent to get up and win some big games. But, I just don't see how it's going to happen consistently across the season for them. And, I think as long as this team is reliant on sort of Ken rallying the troops, then I don't think they have much of a chance in the home and away season, let alone in the finals. And, on the weekend they play the Dogs, right? They have as much talent as the Dogs do on paper, if not, more top-end talent, and yet they lost by 90. Like, the Butters, Jason Horne-Francis were top 3 in clearances for the match, but they just didn't do any damage. They were both bottom 10 on the ground in disposal efficiency by the end of the game, and Jason Horne-Francis was dead last in that category. So, they're obviously built around Horne-Francis, Butters and Rosie, but at the moment they aren't consistent stars. They're just showing the promise of being stars. They're all obviously still 25 and under, so absolutely potential, room to grow, but the supporting cast around them also needs to be a lot better, which, I think there's ultimately a ceiling on this team because of that supporting cast is not very good and the stars themselves are not very consistent. Alrighty, the Saints, they're 13th on my board. They've moved since last week, so they're still where they are, and they're 4-4 on the season, 94.6%, 12th on offense, 12th on defense to start the year. And I think the analysis on the Saints is actually pretty easy. If they win the clearances, they're going to generally be competitive. Otherwise, we sort of saw what happens with the Lions result the week earlier. So, if they do get their hands on the ball first, it's happening via Jack McRae, of course, then, good things are going to happen with Nazar Wangan and Jack Sinclair as well off the back line. So, pretty simple math equation for the Saints at the moment. If they're able to dominate the midfield, then they're going to play well, but otherwise they're going to struggle and put a lot of pressure on their back line, which, does hold up very well. I think their back line is, as I said, one of the best in the league, but they just need to give the midfield just needs to get moving and get their hands on the ball to give their forwards enough chances to kick a winning score. But yeah, just very dependent on the clearances right now for the Saints. And yeah, a lot of their guys are having really strong years though. Jack Higgins up forward, Mitch Owens is playing back to his best after a bit of a down year last year, and they've found some players in Liam O'Connell and Hugo Garcia as well. So yeah, it's sort of a fun team to start the year. And I think they're sort of starting to change the Ross line narrative of always having boring teams as well. I've actually really enjoyed watching the Saints this year, and they copped a bit of shit on the weekend for that Freo game being a Friday night game, but I think that was more Freo's fault than the Saints. The Saints were very fun to watch, kicked some really fun goals, and led by Cooper Sharman and his ode to Jason Ackermanis with one of his celebrations after he kicked an amazing goal from the pocket. So yeah, I think if you're looking for a bit of a fun team to watch this year, it is the Saints. They've got some good guys to watch. Shout out to me, Anthony Caminetti, for a guy who's never played in defence to end up being sort of the leader in marks in the league for a while there is, honestly one of the most surprising starts to a new position I've seen. He really sort of swam in that role, and the last couple of weeks he's been put back up forward, which is his natural position, and I think it's a good thing for his development. I've sort of loved how he is developing into a bit of a swingman all of a sudden, and it'll be an even greater luxury when or if Max King returns. Obviously, big if there, but what that's going to allow to do is they're going to be able to play Mitch Owens more in the midfield, and then Caminetti can go behind the ball without sacrificing the target with Max King is there. So, I think that gives him a bit of positional versatility, his especially across the key positions anyway. So shout out to Anthony Caminetti. 14th, we have the Bombers. They're 4-3 on the season, 88.6%, 15th on offense and 13th on defense, and they're just sort of eking along at the moment. They've had been some solid signs from the younger crew at times, like the new core. I'm sort of defining it as Zach Reed. I've really liked down back. Nate Caddy, of course, Isaac Kako, Sam Durham, and Nick Martin. All those guys are showing that they're part of a core that you'd want to keep around the club. I think that Nick Martin in particular, I haven't been a big believer of him, but he's gone to a different level this year, and as I said, I have been sceptical at times of him, so I'm willing to admit that I've been slightly wrong on him. It's a decent young core to build around though. But ultimately I'm not sure how far it gets you is the only thing. So I think that the next great sort of Essendon team or finals Essendon team is still going to rely on the draft for at least a couple more years. They've got a good outlook this coming draft though. 2 early first round picks. They've got the Melbourne pick, so likely going to be 2 top 8 picks at the worst. So they're primed to have at least a double shot there, or throw those in for Harley Reid and get another big talent in the door. So I think that there's still a bit of a ways away from competing on a finals level, but I think that they've got a core in place where you can start to envision what it might look like anyway. And it would also help if they got a decent run with injuries at the moment as well. Obviously, both ruckman out for the year. Harry Jones with an absolute gruesome ankle injury on the weekend. Jordan Ridley again doing his hamstring. He just unfortunately might be one of those guys, and it's sort of hard. I can't blame them too much because all those guys are key position players, and it's hard to build any sort of consistency with your key position guys being out. And for the shout-outs, part of the Essendon summary, I've got to go with Zach Merritt. I've never seen a team rely on one player more than him. He's truly sort of heliocentric for them, and they set up their offense and defense around him. He's almost like they just he's like the center of the brain, and he just distributes everything around him or coordinates everything around him on both sides of the ball, and he's just so consistent as well. I know he's said how he wants to be remembered as one of the most consistent players ever, and he's absolutely living up to that statement, and he's the only reason they sort of hung on against North Melbourne on the weekend, I thought. I just really think he's just still super underappreciated and deserves another shout out. Melbourne. The D's, so they're 15th for me on the power rankings. They haven't moved anywhere. They're 3-5 on the season with a percentage of 81.6. 16th on offense and 14th on defense. So yeah, pretty grim for the D's at the moment. And yeah, don't be fooled by their recent form. They are really still that bad. They've won against Freo, and we know how inconsistent they are at the moment. So you take that with a grain of salt, I guess, that win. And then the other wins are against Richmond and West Coast, and only just, by the way. So it's super concerning. They're either getting belted or just scraping through against the bottom feeders, which in turn I think makes them a bottom feeder themselves. Max Gawn, unfortunately, is still holding this club together, and I just sort of feel sad for him. There's no leadership around the place other than him. He's one of the best leaders we've seen, I think, and he's been tested very, very heavily over the last few years. And off-field, they've appointed a new president who can't even join the club because he's got a non-compete clause until September, which decisions need to be starting to be made now. He's around Simon Goodwin, about Clayton Oliver asking out of the club yet again, it seems. So, which, just as a side note, I think Clayton asking out is great for Melbourne. At least now his value is low. So, I mean, not at least, like, his value is already low after the drug scandal and everything, but you're not going to get much for him anyway. So hopefully he's at a point in his career where he just wants to go play footy somewhere else and compete. So he might be willing to take a smaller deal from another team, void his Melbourne contract, and then on his way he goes, and you just don't have to worry about the cash anymore. And because that is a horrible deal that they've locked themselves into, the D's, if he does stay. So you'd hate to be paying for his contract if he does leave. But maybe Clayton takes a pay cut to get out of there, which would be the best result for them, as they wouldn't have to attach an asset to get him out the door. But yeah, I think for these, it is a full scale rebuild here. I think the sort of silver lining is that they have had a bit of an influx in talent over the last few years, in the last couple of drafts, and have some nice pieces in place that are young enough that if you do go through a rebuild in the next few years, you've got some guys who are already in the door that you could sort of start to build around you. Harvey Langford, Xavier Lindsay, Caleb Windsor, Cade Chandler, Jake Bowie, Trent Rivers and Judd McVie, all like solid players, but obviously lacking some key position talent there, of course. So they might need a bit of that still. But yeah, I think that people might be surprised at how soon they are able to bounce back if they make the right picks in the next few years. Of course, are lacking their own pick this year, which hurts a little bit. But yeah, we'll ignore that and just keep it positive on the end of that after a bit of a grilling from me on the D's. North Melbourne, 16th. They still haven't moved for me from last week. They're 1-7 on the year, with a percentage of 76.4. 14th in offense, 16th on defense, so the inverse of Melbourne. But yeah, won't go too much into North. I had a bit of a deep dive on them a couple of weeks ago, if you want to listen to that. But they just really don't know how to win games right now, and it's a bit sad if you're the North Melbourne fan. They tried really hard in back-to-back weeks against Port Adelaide and Essendon and just couldn't get it done. And it's hard to say without being inside the four walls, but I'm just a bit concerned that the Clarko contract is sort of detracting from the size of the Clarko contract is detracting from the general development of the other guys on the list, like the young guys. I think that as a team, you have, I don't know, as a team going through a rebuild, you want to invest in young players, and I think that paying like how much they're paying Clarko within the soft cap to lead them to that next promised land or develop these guys is putting too much on him, and he's not that type of coach at the moment. And I'm worried that they don't have enough guys to develop all the young guys that they brought in over the last 6 or 7 years. So you have all this money on him, less in the assistants, development coaches, and I just don't think that that's the right split for a rebuilding team. And I think they've probably tried to compensate a little bit with that. By bringing in Jack Darling, Luke Parker, Caleb Daniel, where you bring them in because it's under a different salary cap. But either way, the development of the younger guys is not happening at the pace that you probably wanted. And I do think that they do have the talent on the list, but somehow it just needs to be unlocked by the coaching staff. And I'm not sure whether Clarko is the coach to do that. Whether you bring him on as like a bit of an advisor after the contract's up, and sort of in that Paul Roos model where he's the patriarch, and then you've got Simon Goodwin learning under him and sort of growing the list out that way. I don't know if that's a better structure, but yeah, it's currently not looking great for them. Richmond, 17th in the power rankings. no change from last week. They're 2-6 in the season, 63.4%, 18th on offense, 17th on defense. So pretty grim, obviously, but expected. I saw them up close on the weekend. Went to the Hawks and Tigers game, and probably wasn't their finest performance, I don't think. But as a Tigers fan, of course, you're just looking at the signs for some of the young players, and I think you're seeing it from Sam Lawler. He's going to be a top 10 midder someday, no doubt in my mind. He's already doing the little things really well, and I think that's sort of what the Tigers are trying to instill in the young guys. I've sort of touched on it a little bit when I've talked about the Tigers, but that none of the young guys have massive roles yet, and that's on purpose. They're sort of being shielded appropriately by their veterans, and but they're doing well with the opportunities they are given the younger guys. And Luke Traynor looks like a promising halfback. Tom Brown the same, is building nicely. I love watching him kick the ball. He's starting to flesh out the defensive side of his game too, and yeah, you probably just want to see a bit more in terms of the midfield quality coming through the pipeline, as well as some key position players. So yeah, I think that Jonty Fowler's looked okay so far. Obviously not going to pen him in for being an absolute star or anything, but yeah, I've liked what I've seen from him as a forward. So hopefully they can get Harry Armstrong on the paddock as the season goes on as well, and see what they have up there, up in the forward line, and hopefully Sam Lawler gets a bit more midfield time as the season goes on too. And just on him, he's going to be the player shout out for Richmond. Haven't done for every team, but yeah, for Richmond, I'm going to give Sam Lawler, and I ran his stats, and so far his season has come out most similar to Dylan Moore and Paul Curtis as well. So that's a pretty scary combo of gut running, brute strength, and score involvement. So yeah, I think that's a really damaging player that Sam Lawler already is. Providing for the Tigers in what is a struggling team. It is the 18th offense in the league. So I think that he's showing some really, really good signs early on for Tigers fans. West Coast, last but not least, and they're 18th at the moment for me. 17th in off, they're 0-8 on the season, 57.7%, 17th on offense, 18th on defense, and I'm sort of just wondering whether they're actually going to win a game this year or not. Everyone really looks very, very much disinterested at the moment. There's off-field issues with players questioning the direction of the club, and I think it's fair that everyone's questioning the effort of the players as well. It's been very lacking at times this year, and it really is a mess there at the moment, and it's really hard to pass through what's going right at the moment. They can't even get their hands on the ball either. There's only 2 guys in this whole team averaging over 19 touches a game, which is just crazy to me. Like, just have someone who's taken 20 kickouts a game. Like, it's like, I don't know how you're only got 2 guys averaging over 19 touches a game, which is just crazy. And neither one of them is Harley Reid either, which is concerning. Liam Baker and Ryan Marich are the only 2 averaging more than that at the moment. So not great. If you're looking for positives, I think the fact that Elijah Hewitt is finally getting a bit of a run at it. He looks good. He kicked 3 on the weekend against the D. So props for them for getting him on the paddock finally. Ruben Jinby, obviously I've talked about him a bit on the podcast. I think he's going to be an elite role player down the track, but those 2 are definitely the shining lights at the moment for them, as well as this other guy I will shout out is Ryan Marich. He's finding the ball for them. He's one of the guys who's averaging over 19 touches a game. He's at 22.1 at the moment, and he's only 21 years old himself. He's going at 75.8% disposal efficiency at the moment, and in what is a pretty rough supporting cast around him is a pretty good rate, I think, and he's elite at rebound 50s. He's averaging 5.6 a game. Loves to run and bounce as well, one of the leaders in bounces per game. So I'd just like to see the defensive side of his game grow a little bit as a halfbacker, or general defender, I guess, but a bit more as the year goes on. He's above average at the moment in his intercept marks. He's averaging 1.4 a game, but he has the sort of athletic profile that would let him get to an elite level in that regard on the defensive side of the ball. He's as I said, good athlete at 196 centimetres, so that's something to build with. And I've liked what I've seen from Ryan Marich from the few Eagles games that I watched this year, and that's where I'm at the moment, guys. Quick bit of a summary. I'll go through the power rankings as the teams are at the moment. We've got Brizzy, Collingwood, Geelong, Hawthorn, the Doggies, GWS, Adelaide, Sydney, Freo, Carlton, Gold Coast, Port, St Kilda, Essendon, Melbourne, North Melbourne, Richmond, and then the West Coast Eagles. So thanks for listening, guys. It's a bit of a longer one today, but wanted to get through all the teams and give a bit of a stock take on where they're at right now in the season. So thanks for sticking through it, and hopefully this has been good for you guys to just summarize it yourselves. Alrighty, thanks for listening, guys.